I'm Steve's little brother, David. On behalf of Amy and Steve's kids, Emily, Sarah, and David, on behalf of Amy's mom, Mrs. Hardy, on behalf of our mom, my brother, my two sisters, I'm really privileged to officially welcome everyone to today's celebration of Steve. All of us love Steve for his whole life, and we connected with him either through that entire life or in different segments. And those stages of his life are represented here today. And I think we could all agree that Steve would be so humbled, but he'd also be really proud to have shared life with everyone here today. So again, thank you so much. My sister is going to open the program with a prayer. There's water on your table. Please help yourself to that through the entire program. And the restrooms are down either hallways, and feel free throughout the entire program to excuse yourself and use the restrooms. Once again, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much.
Let us bow our heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, we gather here today to celebrate the life of Steve, our beloved son, father, husband, brother, son-in-law, brother-in-law, uncle, cousin, and friend. We thank you for the gift of his presence in our lives and for the love and laughter he brought to us all. As we come together in this time of remembrance, we ask for your comfort and peace. Lord, grant us the strength to cherish the beautiful memories we have shared with Steve. Help us to find comfort in each other and in the knowledge that he is now at peace with you. Surround us with your love and light and guide us through this time of sorrow. May we honor Steve's legacy by living our lives with courage, love, laughter, and grace. Please bless this gathering and fill our hearts with gratitude for the time we had with him. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Sister, or as he liked to call me, his roommate. Our story began 55 years ago in Detroit. Steve and I were born to 25-year-old Doug and Judy and big brother Jeff. At the age of 3, we relocated to Syracuse, which gave us a childhood we wouldn't trade for the world. Siblings David and Carrie arrived following our move to round out the Schmahl family of 7. We were kids growing up in the 70s. Life was simple and uncomplicated. We were sent outside to play with no boundaries, no instruction other than to be home in time for dinner. And the lake provided the ultimate playground, no matter the season. Living away from town also gave us a unique experience of playing with just the 5 of us for company. As a result, we were and have always been a very tight-knit family. As a kid, Steve would have wild bursts of energy, yet he could sit still for the hours playing Legos or building model planes and airplanes. He was also the most injury-prone Schmahl kid. The worst accident occurred at the age of 7 when he fell out of the top bunk and broke his jaw. His bravery really shone through after spending days in the hospital and 6 weeks with his mouth wired shut. That was Steve. He always took his lumps and he never complained. Middle school years were fast and fleeting, thank God. We were skinny and awkward and race-faced. Steve was a Boy Scout, he was a wrestler, he played the trombone, contributed to the school newspaper, and he made people laugh all the time. Where I was a shy, rule-following student, Steve was a class clown. But he also had the brains, though, to challenge any theory or lesson. Some teachers appreciated this, and some others did not. But throughout his whole life. Steve memorized and interpreted poems by Frost and Emerson. He was an avid reader who enjoyed Tolkien and King, but he also devoured all the classics. We were kids of the 70s, and then we were teens of the 80s. Big clothes, big hair, and big times. We worked hard and played hard. Wawasee High School in the 80s was a blast. From the age of 15, Steve and I also held the same summer jobs. First at the South Shore Golf Club, and then for the remainder of high school at Wawasee Boat Company. I went with Steve to apply for a job at the marina, who had only previously hired boys. And thanks to him and his encouragement, we broke the glass ceiling, and I was the first girl dock attendant hired. He was so proud. The family may think that Steve always benefited from having me as his twin, but in this case and many others, I was truly the lucky one. Steve was never as interested in team sports as I was growing up, but he discovered a natural ability for distance running and varsity swimming in high school. Broad-shouldered, lean, and flexible, Steve probably had the most athletic build in the family. Sorry, David. Seriously, he was strong as an ox with an ability to push through the pain in those endurance races. So you can add strength and fortitude to his list of attributes. He also had creative talent. He was a gifted artist and writer with a fantastic memory. He had such a quick wit, which also showcased his fast and inventive mind. Along with the quick wit, although he also had a quick temper. He was known as a hothead, but he was also one who could say, "I'm sorry." He was highly intelligent and consistently tested off the charts, slightly higher than me, I just may. For example, I sat in front of a physics class. I was copiously taking notes, listening to every word of the lecture. I would turn around to pass back the quiz, and there would be Steve reading a novel, Catcher in the Rye or something, and of course he would still ace the quiz. For sure, his trademark wit and intelligence will forever be remembered. We went our separate ways in college, studying very different disciplines. For me, accounting at Miami University, and English for him right here in Indiana. Only 2.5 hours apart, you can bet that we visited each other often and got to know each other's college friends. I spent a semester studying abroad in Europe and was thrilled when Steve joined me after classes ended in May of 1990. Being an English major with an affinity for history, he was such an enthusiastic and educated traveler. I will always treasure those memories together. Childhood days were soon behind us, and we both graduated college and embarked on our careers. Steve settled in Indianapolis with his first job, and a few short years would marry the love of his life. In true twin fashion, Steve and Amy were married just 5 weeks before Bob and I. It could have been a double wedding. A year later, I took a job transfer and we moved to Denver. We loved Colorado from the beginning, except the one thing that was missing, family. Well, we weren't lonely for long, because a year after Steve earned his MBA, Steve and Amy moved out to Denver, and we were back living within minutes of each other. Steve and Amy spent 24 years in Colorado raising their 3 incredible children. Steve, Amy, Bob, and I were the best of friends. Along with our 6 kids, we spent every birthday and holiday, baptism, confirmation, graduation, and celebration together. We were so lucky to be together, raising our families. When the kids were little, we traded babysitting services, and later, dog sitting services for our beloved pets. We shared co-ownership of a home in Steamboat Springs, and trips to our special mountain house further bonded our 2 families. We also made annual summer trips back to Indiana, and this allowed for quality time with our extended family as well, and further bonded our families. So brave, strong, resilient, quick-witted, hilarious, family-oriented, and fun. In telling our story, these qualities stand out, and I hope I've done justice to honor my wonderful and complex twin brother. For as twins, we shared everything in life, and those shared experiences can never be replaced. A twin bond is both unbreakable and sacred. I've spoken of many happy memories today, but our shared life was also full of surprises and challenges, loss and grief. Gratefully, as twins, we went through it all together, never once having to feel truly alone. We complemented each other with our different talents and traits, making us quite the dynamic duo from day one. With our own special telepathy and psychic powers, Steve will forever be my wonder twin, my soul and my heart, my roommate. Rest in peace, brother, and give my love to Dad and Bob until we're all together again. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. 40 years ago, we'd be at the sandbar. So I'm just going to get right into it. My name's Chuck Gray, and Steve was a dear friend of mine. I grew up in Muskegon, Michigan. At the end of my 7th grade year, we moved to Syracuse. My dad owned a business, Gray Mobile Homes. He had that business for 35 years. He was actually one of the biggest dealers in the country. We had a house on the lake, a pool, a boat on Lake Michigan. Hell, my dad had a plane. In 1982, interest rates were 19%. The economy was a disaster, and my dad closed his business. A mobile home manufacturer in Appin, Indiana, who'd done business with my dad for years, wanted him to come work with him. My dad never hesitated. He said, "I'd love the opportunity." He didn't look back. He was like that. One of the many traits he had that kind of made him my hero. Needless to say, my life was going to change. Muskegon was a far cry from Manhattan, Chicago, or London, but compared to Syracuse, it sure felt like it. To this 13-year-old boy. We made the move, and that fall, my brother, my best friend, he enrolled at Michigan State. And my world was rocked. I really was scared and sad for the first time in my life. And to top it off, the condo that we moved into didn't allow for pets, and I literally had to leave my dog with a neighbor. Brutal, right? I needed a win, a break, a miracle. Anything to make this new life bearable. Something to give me hope. God gave me a friend for the ages. God gave me Steve. We were friends at first sight. I needed a fresh start, and I think Steve did too. I came to realize pretty quick that in Indiana, if you don't play basketball, you could always fall back on playing basketball. Unfortunately for me, I was 5'0", and Steve had the coordination of a giraffe on a roller skate. We were destined to find a different path. I remember early on in our friendship, we were at our condo, and I asked him if he wanted to go out in the yard and play catch. We did that for a couple minutes, and I realized this wasn't going to be our thing. I suggested we go back inside and listen to some Who records. He told me years later that he was so relieved that we could be friends and it didn't revolve around sports. What our friendship did revolve around was laughter. He was so funny, so smart, my God. We both always had to be on when we were together, had to keep each other sharp. One of the funniest things I've ever seen was his ability to balance on the knuckle of his big toe and peer into the distance like a fire watcher. He really could. It's still one of the top 5 funniest physical comedy moves I've ever seen. We spent our 8th grade year establishing ourselves as who we wanted to be. We both were on student council, started the first dance at the Syracuse Junior High. It was very footloose of us. We did everything together. And we really felt like we were at the top of our game. Our time at the top was pretty short-lived because as soon as our first year together was over, we made the move to high school, and starting over at the bottom was going to require some work, but we were up for it. Steve and I shared a lot of the same interests. Even though we lived in that little town in Indiana, we still sought inspiration from a lot of unique sources. We loved to read, we loved cool bands. We had heroes: Kurt Vonnegut, Jim Morrison, Hunter S. Thompson, Bob Dylan, Mick Jagger, Motorhead, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, John Irving, Talking Heads. We We lived in a little northern Indiana town of 3,000 people at its peak. Something had to give. We had plans. Oh, did we have plans? We agreed we were going to have to ruffle some feathers if we were going to be as cool as we thought we were. Freshman year was a feeling out process. We had to become friends with the Milford and the North Webster kids. We had to figure out who we were going to go on this adventure with. By sophomore year, we had started to hit our stride. Around that time is when we also decided to start experimenting with the party. It's important to know that at that time in our lives, it was fun, exciting, exotic, risky, new, and it checked a lot of our boxes. Obviously, for both of us later in life, it stopped being fun and became an overwhelming burden. But that's a conversation for another time. Of course, if we were going to be about that life, we needed to have a plan. If you ever needed a master builder when it came to a plan, it was Steve. He was like Eisenhower on D-Day every weekend. It was beautiful to behold. I won't go into details because I'm not sure about the statute of limitations on some of our adventures. But they were had and they were glorious. I vividly remember them to this day. I know the planning was out of necessity. He was terrified of his dad. So was I, to be honest. And I also know there was a real desire not to disappoint his mom. There were co-conspirators. The A-team was Mike Bartles, Randy Maggart, and John Bartlett. Those guys were like SEAL Team 6 when it came to executing Steve's plans. Impeccable execution. We could clean each other's houses to pass mother inspections within 30 minutes or less. Right there at the next level were Scotty Bags Robinson, Chris Cotton, Brett Treviola, and the straight man who somehow lived on the edges, but to his credit, he never partook, and that was Tim Mangus. Those guys were really important athletes in sports that people watched, unlike swimming and tennis. We both had Letterman jackets, though. And I was a team captain, for God's sakes. I had a star. So we could only go so far with them. But I gotta give credit to Bags and Cotton. Because once football season senior year was over, those boys really stepped up their game. Well done, Chris. You had time to make up for it. I'm proud of you. I'd love to say that our masterful planning translated into flawless execution at all times, and that would be a lie. We were facing overwhelming odds, and we were super outnumbered. I could probably stand here and tell you that we did get away with it more times than we got caught. And I'm proud of that. The Hall of Fame is filled with 300 hitters. Spring break senior year was our masterpiece. Parents out there, what were you thinking? I have daughters in their mid-20s, and I can't even imagine. I really can't. Being children of the 70s and 80s, to Julie's point, you better pack a lunch and bring a helmet. Wild times indeed. No texting and cell phones, GPS, nothing. We were released into the wild. I marvel at our ingenuity and our determination. The basement in that 70s show was totally based on Randy Maggart's house. I just want to make that clear. We always had an unspoken rule. We can never let Julie get in trouble. She can only see and know so much. It's for her own good. My most vivid Julie story that made it pretty clear that she could take care of herself was when we went to the Aerosmith Ted Nugent concert. At the hallowed halls of the Fort Wayne Coliseum. That was our Coliseum. Again, these parents. God love them. That place was like Mecca for Steve and I. We were in fine form, front row, being crushed by the crowd, that perfect smell of sweat, Marlboros, full of cologne, beer, and whiskey. Like a summer breeze in 86. We were where we belonged. Where's Julie? He screamed. I could barely hear him, but I saw concern in his drug-addled eyes. Oh no, where is Julie? We fearfully looked around, pulsating mosh pit, much to our surprise. 3 rows behind us, soaked from headbanging sweat, wearing an oversized Nugent rules with a Z, shirt. On the shoulders of a very large stranger was the innocent, fragile Julie headbanging her best life. We didn't worry about Julie that much after that. She was gonna be fine. The lake, the boats, the sandbar, the concerts, the road trips, the snowmobiles, I could go on and on. But for those of you who lived it, you know what I'm talking about. Parents out there, were you blind or did you just not care? We had so much fun. When we finished high school and headed off to college, that really did represent an apex moment for Steve and I. Our friendship was never going to match that 5-year window where we learned how to be cool. We learned that we really liked girls a lot. And I have to say, Wawasee was a small school, but the girls there, they proved to me that it is always quality over quantity. The greatest girls in the world walked those halls of Wawasee High School back in the 80s, not debatable. My time with Brother Steve is a cherished time in my life. It was my coming of age time, and God gifted me with one of the all-timers to go through those days with. Steve was my spirit animal. We had so much fun, and we squeezed every drop out of that little town that a couple of guys possibly could have. I'm sad we won't have the chance to relive some of our times together back then. I really thought we were going to get together one day and go down memory lane. I've certainly done a lot of that since we lost Steve. The one thing I've learned through looking back is how much I loved him. I'll be forever grateful for the fact that he was my guide when I moved to Indiana. I could have run into anyone, but I had the good fortune of running into Steve. I wouldn't change a thing. He was a prince of the Midwest for sure. That's a long walk. For those of you I don't know, I'm Pete Fogel, one of Steve's first friends here in the college years on this beautiful oasis we call Bloomington. So I'm going to tell you some of those years were the best of my life. Steve and I came to Bloomington separately, not knowing each other, and we were placed in an academic dorm on the academic floor at McNutt, which I think is something the administration tells you so the parents feel good about dropping their kids off or whatever is next. The great adventure. Steve was across the hall from me, and I had my door open. I was just unpacking my stuff, and he came just to the doorway. He had these bright red pants on. And he said, "Hi, I'm Steve Schmahl." I'm like, "You're what?" He was gone in an instant. I was like, who was that? Of course, we became instant friends. It wasn't too long after that we swapped roommates, merged our stuff together, stereo components. I with all my office furniture from my dad's various offices. He with this indestructible mobile home furniture, very, very durable. I think the same couch lasted 4 years. Amazing. We made our way all around that dorm that semester. It was pretty amazing. We invented some schemes, picking up where Chuck and he left off, on how to sneak beers into the room. This is a dry campus, you might know. Elaborate distraction techniques, layering of clothing, laundry bags, and it's very elaborate. We thought we'd test our mettle a little bit and start a rumor around the dorm. And one week we told every single person we know that there was going to be a food fight in the dining hall Thursday at 6 o'clock. Pass it on. Next person, Thursday, 6 o'clock. Thursday, 6 o'clock. I don't know where we were at Thursday at 6 o'clock. We were not in the dining hall, but apparently there was a massive food fight. Unbeknownst to us, and everybody was looking for someone to blame, and they're like, "I haven't heard from him. I don't know."
That's genius.
We seemed to be everywhere together in those early years, except the library. You know, before Tomcat and Brangelina and Benifer, there was Schmahl. We were a 2-for-1 in every way, shape, or form. You can't spend your whole life in a dorm, so it was time to venture out, and we went to different rush parties around campus. Being from Indianapolis, I had a lot of people I knew from high school that were going to go to this house and this house, and were talking about coming over, and I didn't want to go. I wanted to go with Steve, so I followed Steve to a rush party at the Pike House to eventually follow in the footsteps of Jeff Schmahl and Nick Hubner, the original kings of the Pike House. Being a pledge was pretty awesome. They didn't really call you by your name. You hadn't earned a name yet in the fraternity. You were just simply known as a zit. So it wasn't, hey Pete, can you do this? It's a hey Zit, go do this, you know. Pledship was pretty awesome. We learned some great skills, wrote memorization of every single person's name, hometown, and their major, how to tap a keg, how to clean with bleach, how to wash thousands of dishes with industrial strength, scalding hot water. Very, very good stuff. No surprise to anybody in this room, Steve was our pledge class chairman. And one weekend during pledgeship, we get a walkout weekend where you kind of get to give the middle finger to the actives and disappear for a weekend. Where should we go? Illinois? Michigan? Oh no, we organized a trip to Tulane University in New Orleans. A retired Santa Claus driver with a converted school bus drove us 17 hours to Tulane, stayed up for 24 hours, and then came back. And all the things we did leading up to that time, there was, of course, hell to pay when we got back. Elaborate scheme. We made it through pledgeship and eventually got initiated into the Pike House. And what initially seems like just a random collection of dudes turned into a true friendship that lasts to these days, a true brotherhood. You know, you see a brochure of what is a fraternity, and that's what you expect. Didn't know what to expect, but that's what it turned out to be. Mick, Jones, Smitty, Jeff, T, Schick, Meyer, Clutter, Crump, Dano, and of course our honorable Pike, Jackie Thie. And so many others were part of those days. So when we finally moved into the Pike House full-time and left the friendly confines of the dorm, you know, the Pike House was not very attractive. It was a toaster-shaped building. It had all the heat of a toaster minus the pleasant pastry smell. It really was one of the best decisions of my life, and as the Pikes say in our ceremonial happenings, we say, yay! Thrice yay! Bula bula. That was one of my best decisions, followed by one of my worst decisions of my college career, which was declaring myself a biology major. So the thing about fraternity living, when you're doing a lab experiment, you're trying to grow bean sprouts in styrofoam cups and measure their growth. They're not going to make it when your fraternity brothers keep pouring beer into those cups. That first year, we had a room with 3 roommates, myself and Pat Crump. My dad was very handy with the wood, so he did a lot of paneling, ceiling, trim, molding, and built us a bed that hung from the ceiling on chains that we affectionately called the barge. The rest of those years in the fraternity were just full swing. Between tailgates, oh my gosh, the sea of androgynous rugbies and turtlenecks those days. Endless parties, dances. Some of you young kids don't understand, but before the digital age, you would take 1,000 pictures at a college dance and you'd hope for one good one. But you pay $100 and get these little tiny proofs and get doubles and triples, and none of them ever turned out. My sister Katie was in grad school in Bloomington at that time, and we shared a car. We had a blue station wagon, so Steve would go with me to her. She was just like, oh, you know, fraternity kids, and she was in grad school, and we shared this blue station wagon. And I think my parents were probably thinking, this will be great. You can take several friends to festivals, academic events, you know, grocery shopping, things like that. And what I did is had one friend flatten out the back and see how many kegs we could fit in it. My brother Steve was there for all of it. Steve was very much a leader. He was a modern day Pied Piper in the fraternity, I will tell you. So much so that he rose to the highest office in the land. He was the president of our fraternity. One of our first big policy decisions was that nobody was allowed in the kitchen on weekends because things happen in there, we lose money, which is less money for parties. That's what we're gonna do. Everybody agreed, ring the gavel. Of course, the first weekend we found the keys and we went in there and made omelets for everybody at 3 in the morning. And well, he had a great run as president, he really did.
Everybody knows how talented and smart Steve was. I was always just amazed by him and all the talents he had as an artist, a writer, a humorist. He could really talk to anybody about any topic. Who do you know that was an English major that flipped around right after college and got themselves an MBA and went on to something else? He also had a few hidden talents that were always very curious to me. One is he could take a nap on command. He's like, I'm a little tired, Pete. I'm gonna sleep for about 20 minutes. I'm like, what? And he would just do that. And he'd pop up exactly. And he's like, what's going on? I'm like, amazing. Very witty guy, always could outwit folks to no end. So Steve had a fake ID here in college, and his name was Holden Caulfield, who you might know as the main character in Catching the Rye. Age 42. And we go to the bars, and he'd say hi, and the guy would say, hi, how you doing, sir? Good to see you. And then he did turn 21 eventually. Another story. And he came in and said, you know, I'm 21. Wait a minute, you've been coming here for a couple of years, Mr. Caulfield. Got you again. Steve never seemed to meet a stranger. He was just so full of life and passion and humor. And a most amazing storyteller. And he could turn a trip to the dentist to the most amazing thing you've ever heard. And then this happened, and then this happened. And he just, you know, you wanted to hear what happened in the story. Any story he could tell was, you know, always the best. Everyone was drawn to Steve. I mean, everyone. He was a magnet that drew people in and drew us to each other. He was like the center, and Steve was a friend to everybody. By the representation of our fraternity brothers last night, of all ages, he was the guy, the common denominator, and he was a force. For me, Steve was like family. We shared so many things along the way. My family treated him like family, and the Schmahl family definitely treated me like family. All the great moments in life. And he took me to all these great places that were special to him. Special to him, of course, Lake Wawasee. We went to Captiva. Our senior year spring break, the two men about town, we would have had a big send-off with all of our friends. Instead, we went to the British Virgin Islands with Judy and Doug and the Troutmans and the Danielsons. So, you know, Steve and I and some adults in their 50s and 60s, maybe 70s, sailing around for 8 days. It was an amazing adventure, and I know that place was very special to Steve and the rest of the Schmahls, and he took me along for the ride. I was always happy to be Steve's plus one until the real one. Can't talk about college without talking about Steve's great love for Amy. They were just so perfect for each other, really the gold standard of college romances. They built an amazing life, raised an amazing family, and that story will live on and on. Emily, Sarah, David. Your dad was so proud of each of you and loved you so much. Every time I connected with him after college, it was the first thing he wanted to talk about, the second thing, and the last thing was what all the kids were doing. I know he was a great dad, and he loved you all very, very much. It's impossible to kind of summarize Steve in just a few sentences, but as I look back about what he was all about and what he meant to us all, his magnetic personality, a friend to everyone. He saw the world through rose-colored glasses sometimes. I don't think that's a bad thing. He was a leader, super, super talented, and a proud father. Stephen Douglas Schmahl, you were truly one of a kind. I'm so lucky you walked in my life. I love you, and I will always miss you.
appreciate getting to follow Pete and Chuck. I'm Chris Cotton. Steve and I met when I moved to Syracuse, much like Chuck. I grew up 28 miles from New York City, so it was a little bit of a shock when I got to Syracuse. But Steve befriended me immediately. Chuck and I had a bond because we had a lot of what the hell moments with the community, and Steve was accepting and loving, and we've heard all those stories of why. And I would suggest that in my 40 years of knowing Steve, our friendship was more defined by proximity because of who we were both friends with. And yet we had a bond that we weren't sure what it was until November of this last year. And that's what I'm tasked with talking about today. Somebody generally has to bring down the room. Celebrations of life have laughter and tears at the same time, and I got to share a lot of those with Steve at the end there. The proximity extends to my brother and David being classmates and teammates, our parents and Steve's parents running around in the same groups together. As Chuck mentioned, Julie and I tried to stay out of the fray a little bit, but we were there, so I was a little closer to Julie than Steve, but there was always this bond. Once we graduated from college, we went our separate ways. I would keep up with Steve I lived in Texas with one of his fraternity brothers, Tommy Magus, here somewhere, I saw him earlier. And so I knew what Steve was doing. I would hear from my mom through Judy, and I assumed the same. But what I didn't know when I moved back to Indiana from Texas was that I was carrying some things inside of me that the fun and the partying we talked about earlier and all laughed about became the ways that I dealt with that. As I got into counseling to uncover what all those things were that I was trying to cover up, it was hard to figure that out. But it also allowed me to realize what grief and trauma and mental illness can do to folks. And I began to tell my story, and I wasn't ashamed of it, and I was happy to share it. Not everybody wanted to hear that, but again, the proximity comes into play. Steve didn't know exactly what my story was because I didn't tell him, but because of our proximity and all of you that we have interwoven different ways in Steve's life and mine, he knew what it was. So November 4th, as I'm sure swearing at the TV about the Notre Dame giving away a game to Clemson, I decided I'm going to get on social media either to hide from it or vent about it. I'm not sure which, but I had a message on Instagram. I hadn't talked to Steve, and we were trying to figure out what reunion that was, probably 15 years. But I had a message from Steve, hey, I'm a new Syracuse resident again, I'd love to get together with you. I was ecstatic. Again, this bond, something stirred. I knew I needed to connect with Steve and see Steve. And I'm sorry, I can't look at this table or I'm going to lose it. So we met for lunch at one of Syracuse's finest establishments, Chubby's, in the Wawasee Bowl. It is good food. But as we sat down, again, hadn't seen each other in about 15 years, Steve could have packaged his return to Syracuse any way he wanted. And we all know what a great storyteller he is, what a gregarious person he was. I would have bought that. Could have been, I'm home to help mom in her time of loss. Or I'm between things and figuring out what's next. All stories we all hear are mid-50s, right? But that's not what Steve chose to do. Instead, no BS, all right out on the table. Again, proximity. He knew where I'd been 25 plus years ago. I didn't need to start to tell my story again. He knew it and he felt comfortable enough because we know how Steve was to just lay bare what he was battling. 2 days later, he came to our nonprofit, the Light Recovery Cafe, and immediately he found home. Our conversations changed. In November 2023, we went from a bond built on proximity to one built on community. And Steve began to do the work. And when I say to do the work, part of what he did was make others, as we all know, feel so welcome and such a part of that community. He made fast friends. He pulled people in who were not sure that they wanted to be here. We've got one of the ladies who's part of our program who's here today. She might get mad at me if I point her out, but Amanda said that the first time she came to the Recovery Cafe, she didn't want to be there. She was shy. She was anxious. And the first person to reach out to her with a smile and a warm greeting was Steve. And she's here because her first interaction was with Steve Schmahl in the ways that we've heard family and friends talk about already. That's who Steve was, and that's what I will prefer to remember. With that, he also built, there will be, I assume we'll see some of the pictures we shared. There's one of Steve and Judy in our space on New Year's Eve. And the joy on both of their faces to be in that community was what Steve brought to the table for us. He and I had some great conversations the last 90 days he was with us that always included laughter, but the seriousness of what he shared and talked about and the struggles he had were palpable. And yet, his concern was always for me, hearing his story and his battle when he did that. And it's what pulled so many people close to him. The Recovery Cafe, if you don't know what it is not a food service establishment, but that's part of what we do. Our parent organization is a regional recovery hub that my wife started. Our daughter is bipolar and self-medicated with alcohol, and those two don't go together real well. And she found herself incarcerated. We wanted to find ways to help. We knew there were family members. We knew that those suffering themselves needed a place. And so Candy set out to create a place. When we would make our drive from Leesburg to Rockville, Indiana, where she was housed at the Indiana Department of Corrections, we would stop in Lafayette, all you IU folks, at a little coffee shop there. And one morning I saw a table tent. And I said, what is a recovery cafe? So I Googled it, looked it up. By the time we got home, Candy and I were reaching out to try and figure out how we could bring one of these to Kosciuszko County. Essentially, it's this. It's a place that Steve could call home. You come, you have community, there are resources, we have peer recovery coaches, we always serve a meal, we have classes, and some of the best conversations I had with Steve were brainstorming about what classes we could bring next. The biggest piece of it, though, is recovery circles. It's not 12-step meetings, it's community. What's something you're struggling with? What's something that's going well? What's something you can be held accountable for in the next week? And Steve thrived in those settings because the idea is, as a community, we share those things with one another. And Steve was so good at that. And we have next door to our cafe a recovery home for women, and he made them feel welcome. And if you have worked anywhere in the recovery community, men are not always allies to the women working their way through recovery, but Steve was safe. They recognized that right away, and that's the kind of person he was. And that's how we will continue to remember him. Remember the last hard conversation I had with him, and pardon my language, but we were talking and he said, it's just so damn hard. And I said, it is. I've been there. I get it. I'm happy to share my story with you. Not the place for it right now, but I had been there. I told him that. I understood the thoughts of suicide, all of those kinds of things. And I said, you know what? It's going to get harder. And he said, you are shitting me. And I said, no, it's going to get harder, but it will be better and it will be worth it. The day I got the phone call, 10 days or so after that conversation, I knew what had happened before I talked to anybody because I saw the look in his eyes. The work is freaking hard. And Steve was trying to do it. He was trying to do it for everyone he loved very much. All of you in my line of sight right here. But what he could not get himself to a place of is loving himself enough to do it for him. He was doing it out of love for everybody else. And I purposely did not introduce myself to Amy and the kids when I came in here today because I didn't think I'd make it through this. But the conversations echo what Pete said. I feel like I know all of you because that was interwoven through every conversation we had in that time. And I am so grateful that I was pissed off enough at a Notre Dame game to open my messenger on Instagram, which I rarely would do, and see that message from Steve. Because Steve truly laid it bare to let me know what he had been dealing with. And again, because I wasn't afraid to share where I've been, he knew he could talk to me about those things. Because of this tragic loss, many of you have contributed to our nonprofit. And our goal with that is to use Steve's story to reduce stigma, promote peer recovery resources, and make sure that this doesn't go forgotten. Steve can't be forgotten, but we want his story to be told. And here's why. As I was texting with Amy, Steve Schmahl's story is personal to this family, but it's not unique. There are lots walking that path and battling. Some of you that I've talked to in the wake of this, and others I had been before that. We had one situation, again, proximity, two friends both sharing things with me, and I could not figure out how ethically I could let them know they were fighting the same battle. And so finally I just said, Steve, man, I can't tell you who this is, but would you allow me to give them your phone number so that they could reach out to you? No hesitation before I was done, absolutely. And that's how we recover. That's how people get better. That's how people overcome. And as hard as it was for me to talk about that, I felt like I was shilling a little bit to come talk about our nonprofit, but that's how Steve and I reconnected. And we want to tell his story, and we thank you to those who contributed. We've already engaged a media company to create a series of videos to do that, to find tasteful, professional ways to do what I've stumbled my way through here today to talk about. Because we want Steve's battle to help inform someone else's battle and help inform someone else's loved one's battle. And I can't stress enough that if you're struggling, to reach out. And if you don't understand the decision someone's made, I've been there, and in our family we joke there's no coincidences, but coincidentally, on 2 different occasions, I had people just show up out of the blue. And so that's why I'm here today. And I would encourage you, I will talk to any of you if you want to do that. You can find us at Light Recovery Hub. It's Living in Transition Effectively, LITE, lightrecoveryhub.org, and on social media, Light, and it's on, yeah, I forgot to look at that. So I am so thankful I had that time with Steve, and I'm grateful for the connections with all of you.
Was that so important to acknowledge because it shows how great the good times were and how important these times were to our dad.
Looking through all of his belongings, putting this slideshow and all of these sentiments together really reinforced this. Throughout each phase of his life, Dad was so meticulous in documenting, saving, and labeling every element of his memory in both the physical and verbal form.
He was a storyteller, he was a photographer, he was a true artist. He captured the best of us and everyone. Each one of you were in his pictures, and each one of you were a part of his stories.
It's bittersweet and it's hard to look back on and even to simply remember. But yet, at the end of the day, what a gift it is to have such a vivid picture of the rich life our dad lived. The circumstances of his death are dark and painful, but being able to understand the perspective Dad had on his life through his eyes reminds us how light and how full his life really was.
He died young and he was stricken by such a horrible disease. But we know that his life wasn't all consumed by it. He was wickedly smart, incredibly generous, hilariously witty, remarkably thoughtful, and extremely hardworking. In the end, Dad was happy. He was satisfied with who he surrounded himself with and what he stood for.
Growing up, Dad's #1 mantra was family first. It's obvious how he held that truth throughout his life with his parents, siblings, nieces, nephews, and it's most obvious in how it's transcended through us and the relationship we have with each other as siblings. On behalf of Dad, we want to thank each and every one of you for showing up in his life. Each of you has left a mark on him, positively influencing the incredible husband, brother, son, uncle, friend, and colleague that our dad was.
And most importantly, thank you, Dad. Thank you for the pictures. Thank you for the music. Thank you for the lessons. Thank you for the travels, our passions, our talents, our interests. Thank you for our perfect childhood. And thank you for the life you provided us.
Thank you for teaching us vulnerability and forgiveness. Thank you for showing us that there is a seat for everyone at the table. This nostalgia, this gratitude, this grit, and most importantly, this objective to be present in every moment, both the good and the bad, might be the greatest influence you have on all three of us.
The best of him is in each one of us. We will carry his love, his legacy, and the memory of our beloved dad forever. My brother will be speaking next.
Hello, everyone. I want to just thank everybody in attendance for being here. We're all so blessed that you could come together and help celebrate my dad's life. I would also like to specifically thank my mom and my two sisters. Obviously, the past few months has been very difficult as we've navigated all the emotions following my father's death. But without them, I don't know what I wouldn't be able to speak up here right now. So I'm just so grateful for their guidance. Also, I just want to preface this. I've been thinking the past few months about what I was going to say up here, grappling and rewriting. So I just got a few notes down and I'm just going to kind of go off the cuff. But that was my favorite part about my dad. We would always just talk and talk and talk and talk. And he taught me how to have a good conversation. So here's my one-sided conversation for you guys. Like I said, I love to talk. And in fact, my mom and my sisters have told me that I have a constant need to hear myself think, or that I just talk for the sake of talking. However, nobody embraced that more than my dad. From a young age, my dad taught me how to be curious. As he worked on his projects around the house, I would often pester him about what he was doing, especially when he started working from home in the basement. I would yell down from the top of the basement stairs when I was a little kid, "Hey Dad, what you doing down there?" He was always happy to hear my voice and always allowed me to be curious. In fact, he would go out of his way to always keep me in the loop of what his work life looked like. And even though I had no idea what he was doing on a day-to-day basis, it sounded like the coolest thing in the world, especially when he would go on his work trips. In fact, I thought for a long time that Minnesota was the coolest place on earth. However, as I continued to grow up, and as my interests continued to grow alongside me, he embraced them even more. One of my biggest interests is, like most guys, is sports, which my dad fostered and embraced as he organized many fantasy football leagues and March Madness pools for me and my local friends. Soon, I began playing sports myself, and he took over as my football coach and took our team to new heights. Also, from a young age, I quickly found out that I could extend my bedtime every Monday, Thursday, and Sunday if I was willing to stay up for the full NFL game. And oftentimes he would fall asleep before the fourth quarter ended. Another love that my dad instilled in me was our deep love for music. As you can see, those were some pretty awesome songs that just played in the background. That was all me, and it was all thanks to my dad, because from a young age, he had the best music on earth. Some of my most fond memories are just the random car rides we would have to and from around Centennial, listening to his music and his playlist, and he was the best at that. And nowadays, when I'm with all of my friends, they can rely on me and my aux, and it's all thanks to my dad. However, there was a few bands I didn't understand that he enjoyed when I was growing up. This guy, Morrissey, his voice was awful. And I had no idea how the Smiths could be his favorite band. But of course, for those who knew my dad during high school and college, they knew that he loved the Smiths more than most things. And you can imagine how happy he was when I told him that I finally got it. Furthermore, like him, I began starting to collect my own records, and he gifted me all of his vinyl records that he collected over the years, and now our collection is well over 200. I could continue for hours talking about our shared interests, but I do not want us to be sitting here for a long time. But believe me, I could go on and on. See, my relationship with my father was extremely special. Of course, he embraced the fatherhood role, teaching me all the stereotypical duties of a man, like how to tie a Windsor knot, how to shave, and how to change a tire. But as I've been forced to reflect on my life alongside my dad, the moments that have stood out the most to me were the times that we sat down at Five Guys Burgers and Fries, and ate peanuts, and waited for our burgers, and talked. We would talk about anything. I could always rely on asking him a question about whatever was on my mind, and he would be able to go on and on with a long-winded nuance that, of course, was right. However, every time I came away from a conversation with him, I felt smarter. I could always rely on my dad to talk about anything. And as these memories stand out, I am reminded that not only did he exist as my incredible father, but he existed as an incredible mentor, and more importantly, my best friend. And there is nobody I could rely on more for a great conversation, full of laughs and insight. That was the epitome of our relationship. We loved to learn from each other, We love to listen. We love to hear each other out. And sometimes we'd even like to argue. But we just loved each other so much for our ability to just talk. I think it's important to acknowledge the nature of my father's death. Of course, the sudden passing has left me ebbing and flowing with so many emotions, as I've longed for just one more conversation with my best friend. Every day I find myself wanting to tell my dad something, or wanting to send him a funny video that I come across on Instagram. But I have to remind myself that I can no longer do that. But luckily enough, I inherited my dad's qualities of having very vivid dreams. And sure enough, ever since his passing, I've seen him and I've spoken to him every single night. But I never wake up and dwell on the fact that he's not here. I never have to remind myself that he's no longer with me, because that's not the truth. I feel like every time I do see him in my dreams and I speak with him, it's my subconscious being able to relay what I'm doing on my day-to-day life. And I'm just so grateful that I can continue to carry him with me. Thank you.
She said at her dad's and my wonderful uncle's celebration of life just a few weeks ago. Why I chose to go last, I'll never know. I want to thank all of you for being here today as we have so beautifully honored Steve's remarkable life with grace, respect, humor, and love. I want to thank all of those who contributed to the amazing slideshow, and especially to my industrious Emily, who poured countless bittersweet hours into honoring her amazing dad with this tribute. It's perfect. Thank you to Sarah for designing today's program and the beautiful takeaway cards of Steve's favorite quote. I hope you all enjoyed that. It is wonderful to have such a creative and thoughtful person like you in our family, and we all know where you got it. And to you, David, thank you for choosing our beloved Indiana University, where it all began for Dad and I and the five of us. I am thankful to have you here as my rock, and it's been a joy to experience modern day IU through your eyes and your stories. Thank you to Big David, Carrie, Julie, Chuck, Pete, and Chris for your contributions to Steve's celebration. Your tributes today are true gifts to Steve and our family. I think it is so wonderful that we all know that Steve is just so overwhelmed and touched by your words and memories. I think it's fair to say that each of us in this room today has learned something new about Steve, and how great is that? Thank you, thank you. Now, I would like to tell you the story of Steve Schmahl and of Steve and Amy Schmahl through my eyes. Steve and I were next door neighbors on 3rd Street here at IU, Steve living in the Pike House and me in the Kappa House. We admired each other from afar for a long time, but we were doing our own thing during our early college years. However, our senior year rolled around, and suddenly there became a Pike-Kappa connection between many of our mutual friends. I thought I would jump on the bandwagon, and I asked Steve to a Kappa Valentine's dance. Steve, being the gentleman that he was, thought that we should go on a proper date before the Kaplan event. He picked me up in his Dodge Omni, and it wasn't just any Dodge Omni. It was a white box with multi-layered blue stripes about 3/4 of the way down with Omni written on the side. The passenger door didn't open, so Steve opened his door for me and I crawled into my seat. The AC was on the fritz and it only had AM radio, which was actually kind of cool. It was quite charming, and come to find out, so was Steve. That night, we went to a movie and dinner, and we talked for hours afterwards. I was impressed by Steve's humor and wit from the get-go. He made me laugh like no one else had ever done before. I was equally impressed by his intelligence and his love for his siblings and his parents. This was the beginning of our life together, and with each passing date, each family event, each road trip, we fell more and more in love. After 3 years of dating, Steve proposed to me on Valentine's Day of 1994 in the Beta Well House just beyond beautiful Indiana University Sample Gates. On September 24th of that year, we were married at the First Christian Church on Kirkwood Avenue, the very same church my parents were married 66 years ago this month. So many of you were here that day. You might remember that there was a torrential downpour that morning and our ceremony started at 11:30. We were a little disappointed by this lingering storm, but we were determined not to let it put a damper on our special day. Lo and behold, at 11 a.m. on the nose, the rain stopped, the clouds miraculously parted to a beautiful blue sky and bright sunshine. Steve and I and our entire wedding party viewed this as a moment and the most incredible way to officially start our wedding day and life together. We settled in an apartment on the north side of Indianapolis where Steve and I both worked long hours. At night, Steve attended the Indiana University Kelley School of Business for 3 years, earning his master's in business administration. After a year in our adorable apartment, spending time learning how to cook together and never missing an episode of Friends, we decided it was time to buy a house. 5430 Susan Drive in the Ivy Hills neighborhood of Indianapolis. Not only did we love this brick ranch with green shutters on 3/4 of an acre, but the bonus was that we lived right around the corner from Jeff and Donna. We had so many fun years working on home improvement projects, enjoying the Indianapolis Colts, and attending Pacers games and doing Indy. The best part was being able to have a real place of our own to entertain family, especially our nephews Neil, Michael, Logan, and Andrew, and their parents, of course. We loved spending time with our 4 little guys, and at a very young age, Michael coined the name Uncle Ha-Ha, never Uncle Steve, because Steve made Michael laugh constantly. This name stuck with Steve for years and years, and it was a struggle for some of the Schmahl cousins to determine when they were too old to call him Uncle Ha-Ha, and when it was time to call him Uncle Steve. After Steve's graduation and a trip to Colorado to visit Julie and Bob, we found ourselves thinking, I wonder what it would be like to live there, to be close to Julie and Bob. Steve landed a job with US West with the help of Bob, and off we went, for like 3 or 4 years or so. We packed our belongings in a U-Haul for our temporary adventure that lasted nearly 25 years. Within 3 months, we bought our first Colorado home, and shortly thereafter, found out that we were pregnant with our Emily. Emily arrived on March 9th, 1999, and we were over the moon. She was the tiniest little one with the most beautiful, knowing eyes. They were wide and wise from the start, and we knew that she was something special. We took her everywhere because we could. She was that good. And we would show her off to anyone who was interested. She was the apple of our eyes. Steve's favorite pastime was to take Emily on errands to the big toolbox, our local hardware store. He would dress her up in overalls and a baseball cap. The overalls had rickrack and ribbon, and the baseball caps were pink. FYI. They were true sidekicks. Steve taught her everything about fixing things, building things, creating things, and to this day, there is nothing Emily cannot do. I referenced industrious Emily earlier. Not only is industrial the true meaning of her name, industrious, the true meaning of her name, but she was raised by her dad to be determined and to just figure things out. In the fall of 2001, along came Sarah on October 15th, and what a day that was. After a wonderful pregnancy, and with a very excited big sister-to-be, we couldn't wait to welcome our new addition. To our shock and surprise, Sarah entered this world very compromised with meconium aspiration syndrome, which led to very severe pulmonary hypertension. She was lifelined to the Children's Hospital of Denver, where the very doctor who pioneered the therapy that she needed met Steve at the door at 2 a.m. For those of you with a medical background, the therapy was nitric oxide in combination with an oscillating ventilator. In her nearly 3-week stay at Children's, she went from, and I quote, "She might be the biggest baby in the NICU, but she is by far the most critical," to, and I quote, "This baby of yours is a fighter." Steve and I did not miss a single round with her team of doctors and nurses every day. We dove into learning what medications she was on and why. At one point, she had 10 IVs pumping into her tiny body. And Steve kept a detailed journal so we could be informed every step of the way. Her progress was miraculous, barely avoiding, but successfully avoiding ECMO, a heart-lung bypass that would have potentially caused her lifelong issues. Sarah's entrance to this world was life-changing for Steve and me. It changed us and shaped us as a couple and as parents. Not only did children save Sarah's life, but we witnessed firsthand her doctors and nurses truly practicing medicine on her. On a side note, Steve and I truly believe that the reason Emily decided to pursue nursing is due to all the stories that she heard about Sarah's start. And those of you who know Sarah and Emily know that there is no greater sister bond on the planet. We eventually brought Sarah home on oxygen with very strict orders on how to keep her healthy. When we brought Emily home from preschool each day, we would strip her down in the laundry room, put her clothes in the washing machine, and take her like this to the bathtub. I put a sign on Sarah's carrier that said, "Please do not touch. I was very sick at birth." By the age of 2, we knew that she was going to be totally okay. But not only that, we had the joy of witnessing Sarah's grit and determination through every stage of her life. 7 months after Sarah was born, we decided that we wanted to live closer to Julie and Bob because the 15-minute trip across Arapahoe was just too much. It was too far. At that time, our families each had 2 kids of our own, and we just wanted to be closer. We packed up again and moved to an extension of Julie and Bob's neighborhood homestead. We had a huge open space of trails and streams separating our 2 homes. Not only could we walk to each other's houses now, but we had nature's playground between us, a space that is very, very special to our families. After Sarah's compromised start, we considered ourselves to be the luckiest parents, having 2 healthy daughters, and that would be that. However, Emily and Sarah were pretty darn easy, and we thought, are we done? Along came baby brother, David Tardy Schmahl, on August 12, 2003. We got our boy, and what a joy. The girls adored him, mothered him, and carried him around like a doll. It was great fun to finally dress someone in blue. Enter David's toddler years. Let's just say that challenging was a word that Steve and I used often. David's preschool years were full of life, and there wasn't a day truthfully, that would go by that he didn't get sent to the principal's office. I dreaded the pickup where I had to find out his various offenses. But there was one day that he didn't have to go to the principal's office. What? So off we went to Dairy Queen. The sky's the limit, David. Go for it. Come to find out, years later, those trips to the principal's office weren't so bad. His punishment was usually singing a song to the directors of the preschool or telling stories about his sisters. Never once having to sit in the corner or in a timeout chair. But never fear, David truly turned the corner and the flip switched. By the time he was in grade school, his teachers would tell us stories about conversations with David, and they would marvel at how much he knew about current events, politics, and all that was happening around the world. And this was all Steve. David and Steve spent hours and hours discussing interesting topics that most dads didn't discuss with their young sons. They shared a common bond of intelligent, thought-provoking subject matters, everything sports-related, and human nature. They had a beautiful relationship in this regard, one that each of them cherished and admired. Our time with the Sanders family runs vast and deep. Between our 6 kids, I don't think we ever missed a birthday party, and that's a lot of birthday parties. We spent holidays together, usually switching back and forth between who would host. We spent time in Steamboat, where we shared a house with 3 other families, one of which is here today. Dance recitals, swim meets, scouting events, the list goes on and on. How lucky we all were to have that time together in beautiful Colorado and Homestead Farms in the Willows. Go Tarpons, go Hurricanes. Steve's career in the healthcare sector flourished at a young age, and not only did he make an impact in the industry, but also to so many who worked for and alongside him. We have 3 of Steve's beloved colleagues here and friends here today, and I'm so grateful. The outreach from his former co-workers has been truly remarkable, and I would love to share some words that were sent to me by a former employee of his. Steve was my boss at Quorum Healthcare for 4 years in the managed care division. He was smart, fair, funny, and caring. I was impressed with his wit. I always got along well with him and appreciated his insights and willingness to help with difficult accounts, individuals, and situation. He was a gem of a boss, and he loved his family. I always remember Steve as a fine, upstanding, and virtuous individual, a true family man. I know that we will hear more about his professional impact later. I want to say that I'm so grateful for Steve's success, as it afforded me to be a stay-at-home mom for 13 years, which were some of the happiest years of my life. Now, let's talk about all the hats that Steve wore in our family. Are we good? Oh, wait. Okay. Loving husband and father. It's hard for me to see. Handyman. This was a birthday gift that Steve gave to Emily, a toolbox, and she still has it to this day, and she uses it. Right, Em? Steve, we were afforded so many wonderful home improvement projects because Steve was so talented, and he would always rope in the kids and the dog, and so here's David learning how to tile. This was our COVID project. We redid our patio, and it truly was a family affair. The 5 of us were out there pounding sand and pounding pavement and everything. It was great. There's the perfect example of Emily in her baseball cap helping her dad. He was a dance dad. And all three of them danced. He was a choir and a musical theater dad. He was a swim team dad. Focused. This was one focused, locked-in girl here. He was a flag football dad. He was a scout dad. This was us when we were Cub Scout leaders together. We had a Pinewood Derby workshop in our garage where all the kids would come over and we would prepare their cars for the big race. And we had all the tools for it. He was a rad dad. He was a chef dad. He was a Creighton dad. He was a Mizzou dad. And he was an IU dad. He was the best dad. And husband. There are a lot of things that I know about Steve for certain. Steve was the most intelligent person I have ever known. He was a walking encyclopedia. His mind was as accurate as a Google search. And I venture to say that he could rival ChatGPT any day of the week. Steve made me better. He made me stronger, he made me funnier, he made me wittier, more thoughtful, and more creative. And I know that he had that effect on so many people in this room. As I told my kids this past Father's Day, there is one thing that I am most certain of on this earth. It is how much he loved the three of you with all of his heart. You three were the source of his greatest pride and joy. I know this, every minute that I got to share with Steve was a gift that will remain in my heart forever. And lastly, I know exactly where Steve is. And I know that we will meet again someday. Thank you.
Thank you all. We've got an opportunity, if there's anybody out there that wants to share anything. I do know that the other David T. Jones, our fraternity brother, is in Chicago and wasn't able to be here this weekend, and I believe that he sent some words to be shared by Sean. Yeah. You want to go up to the... Okay. Go on.
Is this test one,
Yeah,
two?
go ahead.
I am Sean Smith. For those I haven't met, what a privilege it is for me and my wife Beth to be here and watching the video of Steve and his family. Took a moment to take a look around at the faces of just about everybody here, and it's amazing. Everyone had sort of the same expression on their face, which is this perma smile, with bursts of laughter and bursts of tears. As Jeff mentioned, David T. Jones, who's a fraternity brother of Steve's, as was I, as am I, had some words that he wanted to share with you right now. I'm so very heartbroken to not be here today with all of you remembering Steve. In my absence, I asked Sean to read these brief words I had prepared, and he was kind enough to agree. If the speech does not go over well, I'd ask that you blame the reader, not the writer. When Jeff suggested I have something ready to say, I honestly struggled. This, despite allegedly being someone who comes up with stuff for a living. So, I turned to the words of the Smiths, one of Steve's all-time favorite bands, for guidance. This charming man. Title of one of the Smiths tracks. Steve was indeed charming. He was kind, humble, smart, and funny. Unassumingly brilliant. Everyone liked Steve. The Pike guys loved him, and so did their parents. And that's not an easy one to pull off. He was genuine and folksy. Throughout every tough and terrible day, he would still casually say that things were, quote-unquote, peachy keen. Steve was an exceptional writer and had the charm to sell his ideas too. I tried to recruit/corrupt him into advertising, but he took a much more responsible path. Stop me if you think that you've heard this one before. That's another Smiths track. Being college buddies, Steve and I could communicate for hours just on old jokes and stories, nicknames, one-liners, and favorite bits from years ago. Steve was always up for some wonderfully stupid exchange or another. We'd go for days on a text chain of increasingly ridiculous rhymes. We'd be characters or just try to one-up the other with a stranger and more clever reply. Our last text back and forth was just absolute and complete nonsense. It is honestly one of the things that I will miss the most. There is never a light that goes out. I truly hate the thought of Steve as a memory. But I know we will all keep him with us forever, in our hearts and in our minds. His kindness, his humor, his brotherhood, his adoration of his family, and his optimistic view of the world. Here's to Steve. Those are the words of Mr. Jones. And if I may add that in the past 3, 4, 5 months, I think each of us have experienced every human emotion there is to be felt. And it's been said that the only human truth is how you feel. So I feel compelled to share with you that what you felt, positive things, negative things, you're allowed to feel. Sometimes there's almost a feeling of relief, and then there's guilt, and then there's guilt that you feel relieved. The one emotion that has bubbled to the fore for me is gratitude. And I've heard it throughout the day today. Gratitude for the man he is, the man he was, the dad, the husband, the uncle, the father. Gratitude that he and he alone could bring into my life wearing 4 layers, plus a rugby and shorts. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. An Eagle Scout knows what those are. Those are the 12 tenets of the Scout Law. And make no mistake, the impact that he had as a Scout leader will echo in those young men for generations, as it will for you, Eagle Scout. And make no mistake, on his best of days, no one embodied those virtues better. God bless you, Steve.
Michael?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Schmahl. I'm the oldest son of Jeff and Donna, and Uncle Steve, Uncle Ha-Ha's nephew, the oldest nephew on the Schmahl side. Yeah, Aunt Amy, I was really counting on telling the Ha-Ha story myself, but I'm glad it was brought up because I think what is unique is that Steve was really my only uncle to receive a nickname like that. And I have really funny uncles, but somehow Steve still was able to stick out in that way. So from very early on, he was quite dear to me and has remained so. One thing also that Steve, as an uncle, has done really well was embrace technology. He was one of the few to be, reaching out on Instagram and Facebook in this way that, we younger people interact nowadays. And he would, just leave a comment on Instagram, and even though we were separated by, quite a bit of space in these past few years, I knew that he was thinking about me and cared and wanted to, about all of his, nieces and nephews especially. And one that I will always remember is, I can't even remember the reason. I know something about Bloomington, so being here might have been Little 500, might have been a football game. But he left a comment and saying that it looks amazing. Can't wait to be down in Bloomington with you and we can split a Sprite together. Which that's always stuck with me. He, in it being funny, but also real, he wasn't afraid to, be honest with us, the kids in his life, and sharing these really good and happy moments as well as hard times. So from now on, when I come back here to Bloomington, I will certainly be sharing a Sprite with my Uncle Ha-Ha. So, thank you.
Uncle Jeff?
Anybody else? Oh, come on up, Daniel. Daniel Vanderheide.
So, as you've heard, I'm Daniel Vanderheide. I'm the youngest of all of the nephews of the Schmahl, Vanderheide, Sanders family. I don't have much to say, but as the nephew of Uncle Steve, something that I noticed is the world needs more of him. More of people like him. That's something that a lot of places don't have, and a lot of people aren't. And someone who will be able to understand why life is life and why it's important to enjoy life in every step of the way. We just need more people like my Uncle Steve.
Anybody else?
I'm one of the work colleagues that, sorry, Amy referenced. When I saw her, my name is Jim Milan's son. I was Steve's work husband for a number of years in Denver. Our offices were right next to each other. We yelled through the wall at each other many, many times. I joked with Amy, phone would ring about 5:30, and I would always just shout from my office, "Chicken is fine. Chicken is fine. What else do you want me to pick up at the store?" All the kids, we were there. Sarah and Louie was already there. David came along. I was telling Melinda, another colleague that we were there, and that one of the things that strikes me about work from home is that the relationships you build through your work husbands, your work wives, your work friends are so important. And Steve and I had a friendship, a really deep friendship, not just a professional. He was so smart, but I was funnier. He would never admit that, but it's so good to be here at IU, which he so loved. We have IU, LSU discussions all the time. When I left my job, Steve stepped into my role, and I moved to New York City, and he cried the day I was leaving. I was like, dude, don't do that. It was just, we had that really special friendship. After I was in New York, he came and he was there for work, and I had tickets to a Broadway play. And the sheer joy, and it was Anything Goes, Sutton Foster. You've never seen it, the beginning of the opening of the first, second act, does this amazing tap dance, it's all online. And the joy when we left, Steve was like, he was just so joyful. And so I was like, here in jaded New York, I'm like, oh, it's a Broadway show. It's like, I've never been to a real Broadway show. And so I was so happy that night that I could give him that. He was just really, really good. After that, we had the chance to work again together. Steve, Melinda, Dan. There are many of us, and I just want to say, over these last few months, lots of people have reached out to me because they knew how special Steve was to us. And so what you read was truly, he was so admired by so many people. So dang smart, too, that we challenge each other all the time. So, I mean, I got all the Christmas cards that I took with me. I found those cleaning out something, so he was so proud of you guys. He really, really was. So, I'm so glad and honored. I feel like I know all about all of you guys, the lake and Syracuse. I mean, we got the whole story, pike, everything. There was downloaded. One of my favorite things was about the second day we worked
say, they love you. And I'm like, wait a second. So he had this back and forth thing where he provided and extolled good tidings to each other. And I was just thrilled. In the workplace, it's very simple. He was a difference maker, an absolute difference maker. Shared a couple of events. I had an appointment on 9/11 at the World Trade Center. I didn't make that appointment because I got circumvented the night before. Instead of meeting at 9:30 at the World Trade Center, I had to be uptown at 8:30 at the Jewish home on the Upper West Side. The last person I was at the World Trade Center with prior to that supposed day was Steve. And Steve had never forgotten that. And he had come to visit me because we were trying to mix our cultures, him being somebody from Indiana and Colorado, to me being a fast-talking New Yorker who thought I was hot, right? And I really wasn't, because I needed a guy with his intelligence to help me. But I guess the single thing that 2013, I lost my job. I got fired. I got fired for doing something wrong. That happens in life. And I was visiting a dying relative in the hospital. I get a phone call while I'm waiting. It's Steve Schmahl. I met a group of guys in New York. I was out of work. These group of guys need someone to do some consulting with. He says, maybe you should meet them. That, after being fired for doing something wrong, turned out to be the best thing that ever happened. Now, in the last year or so, I spent a lot of time with him. Amy, you know that. A lot of conversation. What impressed me most, intertwined with the business work, was the candor that he shared his suffering. The candor. Now, me being someone who has people in my life who have a similar disorder, and as Steve, I was keen on this. He was so honest. He was so honest about it. And the thing that I would say, more than anything, is that he tried to try. He kept trying to try. I forget your name, sir.
Chris.
He tried to try. I would talk to him, and the only thing we could do is love him. Love and encourage, But an absolute star of a person, an absolute star, you are all stars. And the impact that you had on my life is extreme, and I'm so thankful to know you all. Thankful to be here.
Anybody else?
Well, Mom, it's your turn.
So much has been said here today, and I've loved hearing the stories. Maybe not yours, Chuck.
That's what I was shooting for, too.
Doug and I weren't asleep at the wheel, exactly. Oh dear, I could even add more. They were generous. Steve was amazing. He was wonderful. He was brave to the end, and when I say to the end, that was a brave, selfless act. And all through his growing up years, you heard that he had a lot of accidents, surgeries. He was in the hospital more than all of them put together. He never complained. He took his lumps. When he got in trouble, he took his lumps. He was just an incredible kid. One time I said to him, I don't love you any more than the other four, but I've sure put a lot more love into you. But this has been wonderful. I appreciate all of you coming. He would be overwhelmed. People have come from all over. Steve and Karen to come from California. people coming from Colorado, Dean and Holly. I can't name everybody, I would miss you, but, and I look around and you all mean so much to our family. We go back a long while, most all of us. Doug Stark sitting there one time put Steve in South Pacific. He played Little Jerome, and we were on a sailing trip, and we had to coach him to learn Dites-moi. Every time Bob and Doug would come around to talk about Enchanted Hills Playhouse that I was involved in, I'd look beyond them and Steve would be trying to stand on his head. And I had told the kids, now Bob and Doug are going, don't show off, behave. So afterwards I'd say, well, what did I tell you? And he goes, what? I wasn't showing off. Oh yeah, you always stand on your head. I mean, he was only 6 or 7, but trying to get the attention. But there was a lot said about Julie. You know, when Steve came, God sent an angel, and that was his sister. She was so good to him, and he knew it, and he was grateful. When they were starting kindergarten, he hadn't learned to tie his shoes, because if Steve would try something and he didn't do it right away, he didn't care about doing it. And Julie would work and work and work to ride her bike. Steve didn't care about riding a bike after he fell off. He didn't know how to tie his shoes. He'd just put his foot out and she'd get down and tie his shoes. So they were heading off to kindergarten, and I told a white lie. I said, you know, when you go to kindergarten, you have to know how to tie your shoes. I said, well, what are you going to say when the teacher says, can you tie your shoes? He said, maybe it'll come to me. Honest to God. That was always Steve, positive. So, and I can remember him trying to figure out a prom date, and they would sit and go over the list. And, no, she's to this, she's to that, she's to the other. And he helped her through every hard thing. And then he met Amy. And Amy told me one time, all I ever heard was Julie, Julie, Julie. And I was scared to death to meet her. I mean, he had her on such a pedestal. But then I met her. I wasn't scared. She's wonderful. And they're so close now. They're like sisters. So, all's well that ends well. Julie's been through a lot, and this has been hard for her. It's been hard for all of us. But those two did arrive together. Steve was the leader, like you said. He came first. Let her never forget that. And he was 5'13" and she was 5'10". And they were inseparable. One time somebody, when they were in high school, somebody said, are you still going with that blonde? No, that's my sister. They'd call to see if he could ski. Well, Steve isn't here right now. Well, is Julie there? So, you've heard the stories. We have so many. Our family's been close. We've been through a lot in the last few years, but it's done nothing but pull us together. We have a lot of faith. We know where Steve is, and we know that he's in a better place. Anybody that has any idea what it's like to battle those demons of alcohol, know why I'm saying that. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for your generosity to life. That was my idea, that we memorialize Steve in that way, because it did mean a lot to him. Chris is doing a beautiful job along with Tammy, and Steve will remain alive in their care. So, the last thing I want to say is I brought Steve into this world 55 years ago. I was the first to see him. He looked like his grandpa. And then I was the last to see him. And I wouldn't take anything from those last couple months that he lived with me. We had a wonderful time. You ought to watch Jeopardy with Steve. He'll blow you away. And the last time I saw him, his last words to me were, "Mom, nothing about my life makes any sense." Yeah, Steve, it did. You heard it today. Could we pray? Dear Lord, we gather today to say our final goodbyes to our beloved Steve. As this celebration of his life comes to a close, we ask for your comforting presence to surround us. Grant us peace in our hearts and our minds, knowing that he is now in your loving embrace. Amen.
Okay, to end the ceremony, we all wanted to join together to sing a song that my dad sang to us every night before we went to bed, Edelweiss from Sound Music. So I'll start, and if you guys could join in, that would be much appreciated. Acapella. Okay. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, every morning you greet me, small and wide, clean and bright. You look happy to meet me. Blossom of snow, may you bloom and grow forever. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, bless my homeland forever. Well, as I said at my dad's celebration of life in this very room, we did this. We did this for Steve. And I just can't thank you enough for coming. You came from here and far, and we're so, so grateful. So, we'd love for you to join us in a reception at the back of the room. We've got some food and some beverage. And again, thank you so, so very much for being here today.